My name is Ramiro Estallila Jr. and with the additional name of Silver and Gold Destiny Speaker. I'm from the Philippines. I was born January 23, 1930. I'm now 84. And I came to this country in 1976 when I was 46 years old, February 1st. And I just celebrated my anniversary of arrival in America last February 1st. I became a citizen of this country, your country, our country, on July 21, 2008. I'm married. I have 6 grandkids. I have 3 kids with 1 wife. And way back in 1941, Pearl Harbor, we were in Mindanao, southern part of the Philippines, and it was the outbreak of the war. I was 11 years old, and I was in the 6th grade, and we were forced to evacuate from one place to another place because of the war situation, and because we want to be in a place that is a little bit safe. We were in Cotabato. From Iligan Lanao, we went to Cotabato, Mindanao. And I was 11 years old, and because of the war situation, because of there were bandits who were taking advantage of the war situation, we were compelled, the leaders of our barrio or town, little town, were compelled to protect ourselves, to encourage us to protect ourselves from the onslaught of banditry who took advantage of the war situation. And so all those who were willing to help protect the barrio, because the other barrios and other towns have been pillaged, plundered, burned by bandits, who were taking advantage of the commotion and the chaos at the time. Even though I was only 11 years old, I participated in the effort to preserve or protect the town and the barrio that we were in. My teachers were among the teachers that were instrumental in helping us learn an art to protect the town were my father, Ramiro Estallila, and Braulio Roque and Marcelino Bermudez and Bernardo Presas, some other teachers. These teachers were too old to go back to war, but they were veterans of World War I, and now they were our teachers during this time. They were not able to go back to become soldiers again because they were already veterans. These were our teachers during that time. The war situation led us to band ourselves together regardless of tribal affiliation. There were several tribes that we all banded together in one place, and we disregarded sectionalism. We were all in the same boat, and we wanted to protect ourselves from the banditry that was ongoing at the time because of the war situation. Now, as 11 years old, I participated in learning an art. Our teachers were from various tribes, and each one showed us what they know as leaders and as teachers of their own system. So there were the Ilocanos, the Tagalog, and the Visayans, and the Ilonggos, and the Pangasinans, and the other tribes. They contributed to each one of us. They all contributed to train us so that we can protect our barrio. So much so that the art that we have today is based on the teachings of all those teachers. And although the basic ones were, because many of them spoke in Ilocano dialect, I used the term Kabaroan. Kabaroan is the art that's equivalent to today, Arnis or Kali or other terms. I use the word Kabaroan as the basic term for the teaching of martial art that I learned from all the teachers. Ka, Barwan. The word ka is similar to the word sir or senor. Barwan is the it means baron, sir baron, the art of the baron. Barwan is the art of the baron. That's the style that I'm practicing now in teaching the martial art. I would appeal to these teachers who taught us. However, my father was a prodigy of a person whose name was Don Mariano Regunan. Don Mariano Regunan was a well-traveled baron, so to speak. They called him Kabaroan, Sir Baron, the Baron. They refer to him as the Baron Don Mariano Regunan. That is the name now of the art, which is a compendium of the systems, the various styles, and we call it Kabaroan, meaning the art of the barons, the leadership, the art of martial art using weapons. Weapon is the primary, the Baruang system is primarily weapon-based because of the fact that nobody goes to war empty-handed. Nobody goes to war empty-handed. They all have to go at least with one, two, or three weapons whenever they went to war. Now, so Kabaroan is based on the weaponry, and you know that the Philippines, where I come from, is composed of 7,200 islands, but there are 100 different tribes in the Orient, 100 different tribes in the Philippines. If I may compare it, today the size of California is 37 million in population, up to 42,000 in population. But the Philippines as a whole is just the size, 2/3 of the size of California, with a 97 million population today. The Philippines, in spite of the fact there were about 100 different tribes, 100 different systems, 100 different styles, but they are all intended to protect themselves in the event of war, or in times of an emergency. Their system, while it's primarily based on their trade, those who are fishermen, they have certain knives. Those who are climbing coconut trees, they have certain knives. But in time of emergency, they can use the very tools and implements of the trade as their weapons of war, or weapons of protection. And literally in the Philippines, there are 1,000 different weapons, 1,001 different weapons. Bladed, non-bladed, double-bladed, curved, straight, blunt and non-blunt weapons. But they are actually, along with spears and truncheons, and sticks and knives, 1,001 different weapons. These are the weaponry of the Philippines. Because of the diversity, 100 different tribes, yet they are united in the fact that they all wanted to survive in the event of an invasion, and they banded themselves to ward off an enemy. During that time, 1941, was of course, you know, the invasion of World War II. And another country invaded us, but even among themselves, before any invasion, when there are tribal warfares or tribal squabbles, so to speak, whenever they go and fight among themselves, they fight with weapons. And the weaponry that they have, as I classify them today, there are weapons of equal length, weapons of unequal length, there are weapons that are long-range weapons, there are medium-range weapons, there are short-range weapons. In a conventional warfare, even before the advent of the gunpowder, they had also three kinds of weaponry. long-range weapons, medium-range weapons, and short-range weapons. An example of a long-range weapon, for example, is the bow and arrow. It's a long-range weapon. It's a complex, it's a compound weapon. You have the bow and you also have the arrow. The other long-range weapon was the salvatana, sumpit, we call it, or the blowgun, with a dart inside the wing, whether poisoned or non-poisoned, like the bow and arrow, whether poisoned or non-poisoned. It's a long-range weapon used by the Navy. The third kind of weapon that's considered long-range is the sling, the throw sling, the twirl sling, where you have a rock or a hardened mud, into a sling, and you throw one end of the sling, like the story of David and Goliath, the biblical story where David used a sling with a rock to release one piece of the string and release at the same time a bullet or a stone. Those are considered long-range weapons. Another long-range weapon was the cutthroat. It's a contraption in which a rock is released at a certain time, and it's considered a long-range weapon. The medium-range weapons in the art are the spear, the baston, or the stick, whether it's short stick or longer stick. Those are considered medium-range weapons within a distance of 6 feet to 8 feet, where you can release your spear is considered a medium range. And when you can extend your weapon, it's considered a medium range weapon. Now, then the short range weapons, where you are within a very close range, you can almost touch each other's hand, but still with using weapons. However, when you lose all of your weapons, knowing that the weapons are simply extension of the hands, then you resort to empty hand techniques. So all the systems that we have in the Philippines, from north to south, the Philippines, northern Philippines, central Philippines, and southern Philippines, they all have their systems of long-range weaponry, short-range weaponry, and medium-range weaponry in various styles, whether it's the Tagalog Pananandata, the Ilocano Kabaroan, the Armas de Mano, Arnis de Mano, sometimes they call it, Kali, and various terms of the same art. They all use certain weaponry, and sometimes they zero in on a particular style, wherein they use only short-range weapons. They do not use the long-range weaponry or the medium-range weapons, mostly short-range, because of the fact that in the practice as a sport today, they usually come to very close to each other. Sarrada sometimes word used, when you're very close to each other. That is essentially how we have practiced, and then after many years we came to this country to practice the same art and to share the same art, and many have been ahead of us. Modesty aside, my father came to this country way back in 1920. He came to Seattle, Washington, and to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he practiced the art that I'm practicing today. And after, in 1976, after 46 years, I also followed in the footsteps of my dad to come to this country and share the same art that my dad had taught way back in 1920 up to 1929. The art is the same. I found out that my dad taught a priest in Seattle, Washington, and the student of my dad's student came to me and said, I know a little bit about the art that your father had taught, the teacher who had taught me, I said, and I found out that the name Kabaroan is still the art that my dad taught to this priest way back in 1920 up to 1929. one. It's spelled with a K or with a C. And that is the art that I brought after 45 years. I brought to this country too, as my art in sharing to the people of this country. By the way, while I practice the martial art, it is only my sort of a trade for my primary purpose of coming to this country. I'm often asked why I came to this country. Many of my friends have asked me what was the primary purpose I came to this country. Let me share with you this testimony that gives the reason why I came to this country. While I am a martial artist, following on the footsteps of my father as a martial artist, there's actually a primary purpose why I came to this country. Way back in the Philippines, my father, who was a soldier, when he came back from war, you see he was a veteran of both World War I and World War II. When he came back from the jungles of war and battlefield of war, he said to me, "Son, I found out one thing." Let me tell you this, he said, "I found out one thing. In the foxholes, there are no atheists." You see, my father was one of a sort of a atheistic in his persuasion. He was skeptic and atheistic. But he was broad-minded and said, when you grow up, when we were in the 3rd grade, later on you can go to the public school, he said. Now, when he came back from World War II, he told me and said this very succinctly, "Son, I found out that in the foxholes there are no atheists." And because of that, he said, everybody in the battlefield, when there are near-death situations and machine guns here, bombs here, there are exploding, everybody calls for the Lord or the God. Nobody becomes an atheist there. Now, this led me, in turn, when my father finally became converted, became a Christian, he was influential in my becoming a Christian too. And eventually, my father and my mother were both wanting me to go into another course. One wants me to be a lawyer, the other one wants me to be a military man or a doctor. So I chose the middle of the road and went to the ministry. Because of this, my father was pleased, and when I came back from the ministry, I came from the seminary, my aim was, when the opportunity came, I came to this country with that purpose, to pay back to America. Why? Because were it not for the influence of soldiers, American soldiers, who had later on went back to the Philippines to become missionaries. They were the ones, these soldiers, American soldiers, who turned later on to become missionaries when they went back to the Philippines, were influential in bringing us to the knowledge of the scriptures or the Bible or Christianity. And because of this, were it not for them, had it not been for them, soldiers who became later on missionaries, we would not have known probably the Lord of heaven and earth, the master of creation. And because of that, when I came to this country, my intention was to pay back a debt of gratitude, not a financial loan, but a debt of gratitude to pay back to this country. Only to find out that when I came, because I thought everybody was a believer in God in this country, only to find out that my next door neighbor, next street neighbor, next district, next block, there were many who are not believers in God. They thought that they came to this country, they thought that they came into this world by their own selves. And that led me to become, to intend my primary intention was to pay back to this country for the benefit that we have received through the soldiers who were instrumental in bringing us to a knowledge of truth. And my intention was this, to pay back to this country. But in order to pay back to this country, I have to do something to support myself and my family. And so my martial art was my trade, so to speak, to support me, and other trades that I've done, other businesses that I have gone into in order to support myself as a sort of prime minister. The primary duty, my primary desire was to pay back to this country. But I supported myself, like many of us today. You have your own job, you have your own employment, and this is Escrima and the martial art were some of my means of supporting myself into my primary obligation of giving back, paying back to the people of the United States of America. I'm very pleased that I'm here, to be a citizen like most of you here, and to pay back to this country. And I hope that I can serve this country, having become a citizen, with my new name, Silver and Gold, Destiny Speaker, alias Ramiro Estallila Jr., and I'm pleased to be involved in disseminating, and I appreciate so much the fact that many of you are involved in not only disseminating, propagating, but also preserving the art. By the way, my father was in this country in 1920 up to 1929, teaching the same art that now I'm also teaching and sharing, and I appreciate this opportunity very much. Thank you.